Hi everyone, and welcome to day 3 of Build Your Belonging. I'm just going to dive straight in. Um, I want to talk today about what happens when we struggle with the bigger emotions. And essentially, what we can often find is that we feel like they are going to consume us. And often we won't even contemplate really feeling a big emotion because we're worried that we're going to drown in it, and we almost become this big emotion. So for example, like being angry, often many of us struggle with this concept of being angry, because I am an angry person as opposed to I am feeling angry. And often we can end up, that becoming part of our identity, like I am an angry person, just as an example. So I want to dive into this a little bit, and I'm looking up to my right because I've got some notes just to keep me on track. So if I'm not looking directly at the screen, that's why. And I want to show you how actually things could be different for us in this way. And I want to start with asking you a question based on a scenario. So I want you to imagine that when you were growing up, if you had been taught and shown how to feel all of your emotions. So imagine if from a very young age, you were allowed to feel anger and frustration and sadness, and you were, allowed to be in those states without being shut down. Imagine that, when you felt sad, you were told it's okay to feel sad, like it's normal to feel sad. It's okay to feel disappointed. And really learning that from a young age, and, how different things might have been for you. And imagine that if you'd been shown that that was actually the truth, what difference would that make to your life now as an adult? How different would it be for you if you knew that you could feel anger and sadness, frustration, disappointment, and all of those things without it needing to consume you or hijack you or overwhelm you? How different would things be for you? And I want you just to take a moment to contemplate that. And I guess the flip side to that question is considering how much do these emotions hijack you, become barriers, get in the way of how you're feeling because you're trying to squash them down. And we don't allow ourselves to feel them because we have been shut down at a young age. Often, and I'll give some examples in a moment of what I mean, but we then assume that if we are feeling those difficult emotions such as anger and sadness, that there must be something wrong with us, and therefore we are bad if we feel them. I'm a bad person if I express my anger, right? Does that make sense? So we don't allow ourselves to feel these feelings. We suppress them. Now, if you've ever had, as a child, had an argument, maybe with a sibling or a relative or a friend, and you've got angry with that other person as a child, and you've been told off for being angry, then what we do is we take on board the learning is, okay, if I feel anger, then I'm going to get told off, I'm going to be shamed, so there must be something wrong with me, I have to suppress my anger. And we kind of grow up essentially suppressing anger towards parents, caregivers, maybe a teacher, because we know that if we express that emotion, we may be shamed for it. How dare you speak to me like that? Who do you think you are? And we remember these moments from childhood. If you got upset as a child over something and you cried, the chances are that you were probably told to stop crying. If you hurt yourself and you express some emotion around that, you were in pain in some way and you were crying, it's likely that you were told, you're fine, get over it, you're okay, you're absolutely okay. Without any real acknowledgement that you hurt yourself as a child, and that it's actually okay to be upset that you hurt yourself. It's okay to be angry when something has happened. And I'm going to give you a little example. So yesterday I was driving back with my two kids in the back of the car. So it was me and my husband and the 2 kids were in the back, and they were playing a game with a ball, and it's one of these balls, it's called a flat ball. So you squash it down and then over time it starts to pop back up. And they were playing a game where my son was squashing the ball, holding it near my daughter, and then it would pop up, and it was very funny, and they were really enjoying it, and they were laughing, and it was really good fun, and that lovely laughter that you hear from kids. And then my daughter changed her mind about the game. So my son squashed the ball down, held it near, and she said to him, actually, I don't want to do that anymore, I don't want to play this game anymore. And she was very polite, and he ignored her. And so he did it again, squashed the ball down, held it near her. And this time she was a bit more forceful in her tone. She was like, please, can you not do that near me? And he thought it was funny. He's still playing the game. So he ignored her. Third time, pops the ball down, it pops up near her. And she shouts at him and she says, I've had enough. Please stop doing that. And she did raise her voice quite loudly. And my husband kind of told her off for shouting, and I said, no, it's okay, you can shout, because you are expressing a boundary that is really important to you. You have asked 3 times for that game to stop. You've asked politely, then you stressed it a little bit more, and now you're saying that's enough, and you are allowed to do that. And if I had shut her down, if I had said, no, don't be angry, Don't speak to your brother like that. There's a couple of things that she can take away from that situation. Firstly, she learns that her boundaries are not worth anything, and that actually her boundaries can be crossed, and she has to put up with that. She has to put up with that treatment, and that there's no consent for her. And if you think about the bigger picture for that, particularly for young girls, also for boys too, but perhaps it's slightly more prominent for young girls. If we're teaching our youngsters that they're not allowed to have boundaries, they're not allowed to say no, there's a long-term impact for this. So I'm quite keen for her to be able to express that boundary and say, no, that's not okay. And she's allowed to shout. She is allowed to shout. She had asked twice, and I am not going to shut her down. I'm not going to shut her down on that, because I want both my kids to learn that if their boundaries are crossed, they are allowed to stand up for themselves, and they are allowed to say no, and they are allowed to shout if they need to. I don't want my children thinking that they just have to accept whatever is put in front of them, or however they are treated. And so why is this relevant to this conversation that I'm embarking on today? And it's because this idea about identifying with an emotion and becoming an emotion. And, if we feel that an emotion is wrong, so, when that inevitable sadness, frustration, anger, disappointment, rage appears in every single one of us from time to time, which it will do because we're human, we can almost become obsessed with that feeling, because we think, oh my God, there must be something wrong with me if I am feeling this emotion. Because as a kid, I was shut down for being angry. I was shut down for being sad. And if I feel this emotion, there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. I need fixing. And ultimately, the real deep element of this is I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not worthy of being loved because I haven't created the ability to understand and process those emotions. And we're not taught how to do that. It's not your fault. We are not taught how to do that. We were taught to shut down emotions, move on, get over it. So when we feel them all, and there isn't a single person on this planet that doesn't feel all of those emotions. They might not admit it, but we are all designed to experience the full spectrum. When we feel them, we have absolutely no capacity to cope and manage. And so then there must be something wrong, and it becomes a massive thing because we don't know what to do. We don't want to be unlovable or unloved, and we can see how from childhood this can be a really deep-rooted thing. And it's important to mention that, most of our parents were doing what they thought was right, most of them. They thought that was the way to manage emotions. So it's not their fault as such, unless, of course, there was kind of deliberate emotional abuse or neglect going on, which is a whole different situation. And the antidote to all of this is to raise our awareness, start to learn new ways, start to reparent ourselves. So let's look at let's look at what the flip side to all of this is. The flip side is if we can become aware of, what is going on internally, what are we feeling, and we can give ourselves permission, which is what I was talking about in day 1 and day 2, and to really acknowledge, and this is a really important part of this, that there is no such thing as a good or a bad emotion. Emotions are emotions. We as humans have determined whether something is good or something is bad. Being angry is bad because it's hard to feel. It's hard to feel angry. It's hard to feel sad. And, but let me tell you something about the flip side of that. Joy can be really hard to feel. Joy can be a really difficult emotion to feel because we don't want to let go. We don't want to surrender to it. We hold ourselves so tightly. So, this concept of good and bad emotions is just a social construct, and it's not the truth. It's not the truth. We can learn some mechanisms to really allow those feelings to be there. And that's really the point of this whole series that I'm working through with you. And if you've had a chance to listen to day 1 and day 2 yet, what you'll see is I'm walking you through this really gradually. So day 1 was, the lesson about the importance of awareness and permission. And yesterday was a practice around how can I start to incorporate a mindset of possibility and curiosity about my emotions. It's learning that as human beings, the reality is we are designed to feel feelings, not all at once, hopefully, but, we can experience the feeling, we can allow it to be there, we don't berate ourselves for having it, and then we can move on. And actually, if we're able to do that, the feelings move on a lot quicker. It's a much quicker process. It means we need to put some initial work in to be able to enable that. But the long-term gain is you don't get stuck in the anger, the sadness, the frustration. You're not replaying those conversations over and over in your head, wishing that you'd said something different and still being angry about it. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's really the essence of today's lesson. And tomorrow there's going to be a practice that is designed to really reinforce this piece of learning today. So you've got another thing to add into your toolkit tomorrow. And as we gather these tools, I want you to know that they're yours, they're yours to use however you want. There's no right or wrong. I am not here telling you this is how you have to do it. I would encourage you to give every single one of them a go because there's a slightly different slant to each technique. And you might just find that one thing works better for you than the other. And that is great. Run with it, go with it, do what works for you. And remember that this is a cumulative effect. This is all about a practice. We are building a muscle here of awareness and curiosity, asking judgment to step back and just really allowing ourselves to experience everything that's coming up. And really with this purpose of kind of increasing our capacity. That's how I like to see it. So thank you for today. And I've managed to do it in under 15 minutes, which I didn't think I was going to be able to do. The first 2 days were a bit longer, so I'm very pleased with myself for that. Any comments or questions, pop them down in the chat. You can DM me, you can email me. I really want to hear your feedback. I want to know how you're getting on with this. It really matters to me. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you all tomorrow.